Bob, thanks for coming back here and spending some time with us. Big controversy from the outside looking in on the Askren Lawler stoppage. Curious, kind of what you saw there, what decision was made, and how you guys walked through that.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your patience, for waiting for me to show up. Is this on? I don't have my hearing aids in. Okay. Every fight that we have a briefing before the fight and a debriefing afterwards. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. With the Lawler fight, according to referee Herb Dean, who's a world-class referee, it was a borderline stoppage. Robbie was doing significant damage, and he thought that Askren was fighting just enough back so that he didn't have to stop that fight. Okay? So he, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I thought you just.
Well, that's fine. It started out there, but then we did get to the choke.
Okay, so yeah, I'd be happy to answer that choke. And the first thing I like to share with everybody here, between MMA and boxing, you guys write. You ladies and gentlemen write on various sites and papers. But I want to start off by telling you that if you're not familiar with it, a referee has an incredible job. He's got, or she, has 2 lives in their hands in a cage or a 20-by-20 ring in the state of Nevada, okay? There's a litany of things that go into being a world-class referee, all right? And this particular question, in the Bulldog choke on Robbie, you could see it right in front of us that when Herb picked up his hand just dropped, okay? It just dropped, which would be indicative of him being out, okay? And then he went ahead and grabbed his hand again, and it came up a little, and it moved ever so slightly, okay? There was no doubt in our mind that he was out. Whether, you can argue if you've ever been choked out, if you've ever been knocked out. There's times when you've been choked or knocked out, and there's times where you say, hey, man, what the hell happened? I mean, and I'm saying that I'm not a professional, was never a professional fighter, but I've had it happen to me because somebody asked me that tonight, and I thought it was kind of freaking inappropriate, but I'll bring that to the table right now. So with the Nevada State Athletic Commission, our number 1 priority is the health and safety of the fighter. In our pre-brief fights, I specifically instruct the referees to make sure we stop the fight 1 punch or 1 kick sooner than later. Okay? In the interest of the health and safety of the fighter, Robbie's a phenomenal warrior. He's been in the business for quite some time. He was clearly out. If you were sitting where we were, which you were on the opposite side of where we were, and anybody that follows boxing knows that sometimes that can be critical in making a decision. And Herb decided to pull the plug and say he was, he was submitted. Now, Robbie, you may say, Robbie jumped right up and said, I won't repeat what he said, hey, what the fuck, man, I was good, or words to that effect. And then he and Herb had a conversation. And then kudos to Robbie because he was the consummate professional and talked with Herb afterwards, came to whatever understanding they did, and congratulated the opponent. And that was the end of the fight. And I can tell you right now, as the executive director and on behalf of the commission, none of us had a problem with that.
Bob, I guess the only other question I had in terms of that is that a situation where instant replay could have been used, or did you go to the replay at all? I mean, is that something where, because as you said, we were on the other side and couldn't really see, could video evidence have helped a little bit to make sure the situation was right?
That's excuse me, that's a great question. In that particular instance, no, we didn't need instant replay. Herb didn't ask for it, nor did I think we needed it because it was like right in front of me. And when, you take a look at his arm, it was, it was like a no-brainer from where we sat. Now, I'm not a ringside physician. I don't have any medical background. Could he have come back shortly after and oxygen got back to the brain? He was out, and then all of a sudden it came back? Sure. But when you see that arm just drop, hey, man, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it for us, for the fighter. And instead of saying we're customer service oriented, we're fighter service oriented. And, our actions speak for our words. We obviously wish Robbie continued success. And, it was an unfortunate situation because he was tuning up Ben pretty well.
Yeah, average.
Well, in my opinion, pretty well. Right. He got lucky. Well, we'll see. You ask for bigger and better opponents. I'm sure they'll get it. And we wish you continued success, too. And I take nothing away from you now that you're sitting over there. I better be careful. No. Bottom line is what I said is really what I said. And, now that he's here, I'll give him kudos because he really did weather the storm. And I'll tell you right now, all of you, this is exactly what we speak about in our debriefings. We're very fortunate here in Las Vegas because all the officials stay here. We fly them in. They don't have to drive 2 hours after the event. And we stay here and we go over what we did right and what we could have done better. And that's been a standard practice here for almost 5 years that I've been the executive director. I'm welcome to take any other questions or concerns.
Hey, Bob. Right in front.
Sorry. Told you, I'm my hearing aid. Been around too much gunfire in my life, so be careful. Now, go ahead, Mark.
I just want to get a clarification on the replay rule in Nevada. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Replay can be used during the course of the fight, and the fight can still continue. I know in a lot of other jurisdictions that if you're going to go to replay, the fight has to end after that. That's it. Correct?
That is correct. Our regs have recently been approved so that we can use instant replay in more than the one opportunity that we have to use it right now. We will be putting a list together, that would be in favor of the fighters of when we want to utilize instant replay so that if fighter A really damages fighter B, we don't give fighter B too much of a time to recuperate when we take a look at the replay. But we will fine-tune that, and I'm authorized to do that, as is the chairman or any other commissioners, and that's something that we will be doing with boxing as well. It's a wonderful tool. Every other sport uses it. We're going to be using it more often. Just as a quick aside, a couple of years ago at the Hard Rock, at the DeGale fight, unfortunately, one of the referees thought it was a punch that caught DeGale in the eye, and it turned out to be a headbutt. And when he walked by me, I said, "Hey, that was a headbutt, right?" And he goes, "No, it was a punch." And it was probably a poor question on my part, but it really rocked my world because it was clearly a headbutt, and DeGale was making a comeback. This was a big fight for him. I'm going, man, if we get this wrong, it's just unacceptable for this fighter's profession, and this is not what we get paid to do. And fortunately, Mr. DeGale weathered the storm, and he ended up winning the fight, even though he retired, a month ago. Say, Kev. Last week. All right.
Bob, in the main event, when Jones struck Smith when he was on the ground, when Herb was deciding the penalty, he stopped and watched the monitor. He watched the overhead replay of the incident. Is that encouraged? Is that part of regulation? How does that work?
Another great question. Based on the fact that our regs were just recently approved to utilize instant replay, and we don't have a standard operational procedure for them, I spoke with the referees about it prior to the fight, and I said, hey, you got something that comes up, you're not sure if it was a headbutt, a kick, a knee for a grounded opponent, let me know and we'll go to the instant replay. So in that particular case, I had already been speaking to the people in the truck so that we could make sure we got it right back, and got the information I requested right away for the referee, and that's why it was implemented tonight. It might have been somewhat awkward, but when all is said and done, as far as we're concerned, it's in the best interest of the fighter, and that's why we're here. I hope that answered your question, Adam.
So, Bob, right here.
Thank you.
How you doing, Bob?
All right, Lance.
Hey. So can you explain exactly what happened? So it has to be an intentional thing for the fight to have stopped and be ruled a DQ, or what exactly was the ruling based on with the 2 points?
Okay, Herb, make a long story short, because there's other things I could speak about, but, Herb thought that was an intentional foul. He believed that, Mr. Jones had several techniques that were borderline. They weren't any fouls, but, he was throwing some kicks and some knees that were, very close. And when that knee hit him in the head, Herb thought it was intentional, called it intentional. Mr. Smith was able to continue, and thus Herb took a mandatory 2-point deduction, or he could have DQ'd him.
Why not the DQ?
Because Mr. Smith, Anthony, was able to continue.
All right, Bob. Right here.
Thank you.
So this is definitely not the first time we've seen John Jones involved in something that seemed like an intentional foul, and definitely not the first time that it's happened in Nevada. Is this something that you want to consider as far as instructions to him in the corner, or when his licensing hearing is coming up? Is this something that's going to play a factor into any decisions Nevada makes with him?
Yeah, no, that's another great question, and I want to thank you for, I don't want to make a habit of it, but I want to thank you for asking me to come and speak today. No, we don't have any prejudice or bias towards Mr. Jones and the manner in which he fights, or any other fighter. I can assure you on the championship fights that either myself or the chief assistant, Jeff Mullen, tonight when we had 2 championship fights, we go into the dressing room and we go through the pre-fight instructions with the fighter, with the referee. The chairman Marnell III also goes, and sometimes some of the commissioners, so that when the referee gives a pre-fight instruction, there's a clear-cut understanding that, the fingers have to be back, that some people have some concerns about that, and rightfully so. So, that'll be emphasized along with the other unified rules. If a fighter in the past has had a habit of doing something that's borderline, typically the other camp will bring it up, and we will say, listen, we will address it with that fighter. Right now, we're addressing the same unified rules with you, and if that comes up in the fight, we'll address it at the fight, during the fight, excuse me. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Anything else? You sure you don't want anything?
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you're looking for somebody bigger and better, huh? It's definitely not me. Thank you very much.